Então, olá a todos. Nós estamos dando início a mais um Pretzel. Estamos com convidados muito especiais aqui dos Estados Unidos. Estamos com Georgia Hunter, que é a escritora e também responsável pela adaptação do livro que nós vamos estar falando aqui. Um livro que existe em português, já foi traduzido. Um livro que saiu em 2018 nos Estados Unidos, com o título que tem tudo a ver, obviamente, com a história e com o que a gente vai estar conversando hoje. O título é We Are the Lucky Ones, em português, pela editora Record. Tem o título, a tradução exata, Somos os que tiveram sorte. E um livro que fez um grande sucesso, uma repercussão enorme, e que foi lançado há pouquíssimos meses nos Estados Unidos, numa série com o Hulu, que é uma subsidiária da Disney, e vai estar estreando aqui no Brasil. Depois a gente vai pegar algumas informações a mais com a Georgia, exatamente da estreia aqui nas televisões do Brasil. Algumas pessoas aqui brasileiros já tiveram acesso, já viram, e um sucesso enorme, e para nós muito especial a gente estar aqui com ela, com a Georgia, e estamos aqui com duas pessoas muito queridas. Vou falar aqui em ordem né, familiarmente aqui, o primogênito, né, o mais velho, pelo menos, que é o Joseph, que está conosco de São Paulo, Joseph Kurk, e o Michel Kurk, aqui do Rio de Janeiro, né, os dois muito queridos, família Kurk conhecida, né, o Joseph, que eu estou chamando de Joseph, mas todo mundo em São Paulo conhece ele como Zé. Então, o Zé está aí, do lado dele está a Adriana, a esposa dele, muito querida também. E eles vão estar participando aqui porque essa história é uma história que, obviamente, conta a história deles, da família deles, né, da família tanto da Georgia quanto do Michel, mas no caso do Zé, o Zé estava lá presente. Ele é o último sobrevivente de toda essa narrativa incrível, de todos os familiares que se salvaram todos. Eu acho que essa é a nossa história. Ela é uma história sobre o Holocausto, e apesar de, obviamente, isso ser uma raridade, é uma história que o título do livro traduz de maneira muito clara, que é uma família que conseguiu, apesar de tudo, sobreviver e perceber que foram vários fatos, vários acasos, várias possibilidades que permitiram isso, e eles se sentem, obviamente, sortudos, né, por terem tido esse resultado, não só de sobrevivência de alguns, mas de todos eles, que é o que faz dessa história uma história muito impactante e muito, como às vezes, de final feliz no meio de todo aquele horror. Nós vamos conversar primeiro. I'm going to start talking with you, Georgia. First of all, thank you so much for opening your time, your agenda to be with us. And I understand you're like a very close family. You know, it's very, very, there's so much love when each one of you talk about each other. So it's really very special to be sort of invading this family space here to share this story with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. And you're not invading at all. It's our honor to be here talking with you. We appreciate you having us on. And this is the first podcast I've been able to do with my family members, with my cousins. So I'm so lucky to have Michelle and Jose joining me tonight. And I can't wait to hear what kind of questions you have and tell you a little bit more about our story and how we unearthed it and kind of how it came to be. So thanks for having us.
So I thought of doing this. First of all, understanding how did you pick the story? How did you build it into a very successful book, and then to make it into the real world of the mainstream TV? Could you tell us briefly how the sequence of events?
Yeah, sure. You know, it's I think it's not your typical a journey from idea to book to television. I'm told, because this is my first everything, my first book, my first television series, and I'm told it doesn't often happen this way. And for me, it's very, very personal, right? Because it's my family story. So it all began for me growing up as a little kid in Massachusetts. I was very close with my grandfather, Addie Courts, who Logan Lerman plays in the series. And yet he never talked about growing up in Poland or his Holocaust past. It just wasn't a part of our conversations. Like, I don't think it was a secret. He would have told me about it if I asked him, but I was quite young, and by the time I was 11 or 12, he was sick, and I never had the chance to ask him the questions that I wish I had. And then when, let's see, I was 14 when he passed away. And at 15, an English teacher in my high school assigned us a project and said, go out and interview a relative and learn something about your roots and in turn about yourselves. And so my grandfather's memory was quite fresh, and I decided to sit down with my grandmother, Caroline, who you also meet late in the book and late in the series. And it was over the course of that hour with her that I discovered this piece of my history, that I came from a family of Holocaust survivors, and my grandfather was one of five, and they all had their own paths to survival. And she talked about how he managed to get out of France. He was the only sibling not living in Poland at the start of the war. He was in France, and she talked about how he managed to get out on a ship that was bound for Brazil. She talked about how he fell in love on that ship with a young Czechoslovakian refugee. Lucky for me, that didn't work out because I wouldn't be here today if it had. But and she was fuzzy on the details, but she said eventually he ended up in Rio, and he lost touch with his family back in Europe, and he didn't hear from them for the duration of the war. And when I asked about that family, she said, your grandfather really didn't, he didn't talk about it much. And when I met them, they didn't talk about it much. So she didn't have very many answers for me. So that was when I was 15. I have the paper that I wrote. I broke it out the other day. This was the paper from
Oh,
that early assignment. I called it Papa's
oh,
Gift.
really? Still have it?
This is my grandfather. Yeah. Um, and it's really fun to read it back, my little voice at 15 years old trying to capture his story. And then 5 or 6 years later, and when I graduated from university, my mother, who is one of Michelle and Jose's first cousins, there are 10 on my grandfather's side of the second generation survivors, she decided to host a family reunion, and it became the first of many. Like, we haven't stopped since, but this was the year 2000. And
Before that, you had no contact with them?
no, we knew each
When
other.
you
I, of course, had met them, we had visited, but we lived on different continents. We weren't seeing each other all the time, but of course I knew about them. We visited, I adored every time I got to hang out with uh, the second generation, and then my generation, cousins of my generation as well. But it wasn't as frequent probably as any of us would have liked. So I'd met them independently, but this was the first time, for me at least, that we had all come together. And she invited all 10 first cousins. They all immediately said, yes, we're in. They came, they flew in. I think there were 30 plus people under our roof at one time, from Brazil and France and Israel and Colombia and California and Vermont and you name it. And it was a beautiful weekend, and full week together. And I met cousins I'd never met before. There was music, there were all kinds of foods being prepared. And one night at that reunion, I wandered out to the back porch where these guys and my mom and her cousins were all sitting, and they were telling stories. And I realized they were telling stories about the war. And I leaned in and started listening and realized that they were stories that were unlike anything I'd ever heard before. Jose talked about being born in the Siberian gulag, and how his mom said it was so cold in the wintertime that as a baby his eyes would freeze shut, and she would have to use her breast milk to coax them open. You imagine me sitting there at 21 years old and hearing a story like that, right? Like, and Anna talked about her mother hiking over the Austrian Alps to safety after the war, and Felicia talked about an escape from the ghetto, and I heard about false IDs and a disguised circumcision, and the stories went on and on and on. And I remember thinking, how am I just hearing these now? And someone has to write them down. And I will never forget, at the end of that dinner or end of that conversation, Felicia looked around at everybody at the table and said, it's really a miracle that we're all here today. And then she said, we were the lucky ones. And so
Oh,
I think the idea was seeded then in 2000, but I wasn't ready to say this is something I'm going to do. I think it sat somewhere deep in my heart, and I couldn't let it
you had
go.
just graduated, right?
Just
What did
graduated
of what? Just college, or were you? What is
college
your?
at university. I had studied psychology. It was 2000. I was going with my girlfriends to the Sydney Olympics to go have some fun and to travel. I mean, it was like that stage of my life. Didn't know exactly what I was going to do for a job. Came back, got a job, did the whole thing, the adult thing. But still, there was this idea that I couldn't quite shake, that someone had to capture the story. And so 8 years later, I raised my hand and I said, I think I want to do this. And I first, got the support of my husband and my mother. And then I reached out.
Any reason why it
I don't,
happened?
no, because I wasn't uh, aspiring to be a famous author. I had no, I don't know. It was just as a voice, a calling, whatever you want to call it, that said, I have to do this. I want to do this. And it was a little daunting because the family is so global, right? I knew the first thing I wanted to do was to spend time with my relatives and ask questions and have as many interviews as I could to hear the oral history piece of.
So you first went to them again. You went
I,
to.
I emailed everybody and I said, I'd like to do this. Is that okay? And everyone was like, yes, do it. The support right from the very beginning was amazing, because you do hear about survivors who are not so willing to talk about their experiences. That was not the case with our family. And granted, Felicia was really the only survivor in the family with firsthand memories, right? These guys were born during the war and maybe had like a little bit of memory from the very last years, right? Jose, you can speak to that later, but I was asking to spend a lot of time with second generation and these cousins, and they all immediately said, please, let's do this. And they supported the idea wholeheartedly. So yeah, I flew around the world and brought my little digital voice recorder and sat in living rooms and asked a whole lot of questions. And that was in 2008 when I started. And in the meantime, I was collecting records from outside resources, from databases and archives and museums. And Michelle was helping me to translate books about Susadantis, and we were just going down a million rabbit holes to try to fill the gaps in the oral history, because everyone had
Sure.
little pieces of this story, right? But no one had the complete story, or often there were gaps that we had to fill. So I was doing outside research, and I was also spending a lot of time. I spent 2 summers traveling in the footsteps of the family members throughout Poland, Italy, Austria, Czech Republic, and exploring Rio, old addresses. And that was important to me too, just to kind of stand in their footsteps, especially go back to the
Were you
town.
doing the writing as you were researching, or you just build up everything and then sat and wrote?
It was a good question. So I would get so excited when I would come home from an interview, like Felicia would tell a story, or Michelle would tell a story, and I'd hear about Siberia. And I'd come home and I'd write a little scene, just trying to describe, imagine what it would have been like in that moment for those relatives. And eventually I had way too many like one-off little scenes, and I realized this is too much. The story is huge, right? It's like 4 continents and 8 years, and it was just too much. And I realized I had to organize it in some way. So I can't remember when exactly I decided I would try to write it in chronological order. I wrote a timeline. So I started a timeline, and I color coded it by sibling. So who was where and when. And then I peppered in historical context. So that was very helpful. And then eventually I decided, well, maybe I'll write this as nonfiction, maybe, because it's all true and I've spent so long
Sure.
researching it. And in order to write a book that's nonfiction, as you probably know, you need to, or at least in the States, you have to submit a proposal. And in a proposal, you need a chapter outline, like here's how each chapter will unfold and in what order. And so I forced myself to do that, which was really helpful. And once I had the outline and the timeline, then I was able to start writing it chronologically, which made a little bit more sense in my mind as far as like not feeling so like one-off and chaotic. But I can't say I was writing the whole time, because I would get so excited when I heard a story that I would kind of jot
But
it.
even though it was a nonfiction, it was pretty much a romance kind of story. So
Yeah,
did you write it like that?
I mean, all I tried to do, I think my mission was simply to do the story justice, you know, to try to tell it as truthfully as I could. But I also wanted to tell it. I didn't even have kids when I started. I had my first son halfway through the process in 2011, and then the book came out in 2017. But I knew I wanted to write it in a way that my kids and their kids and their kids and so on could pick it up and read it and feel like they were there, like feel like they were in the shoes of their ancestors, not looking back at history in like black and white or in a way that was felt preachy or dusty or sepia toned. I wanted it to feel like real and relevant so they could relate and they could understand what it was like to have to survive back then. So in the end, in doing that, I ended up having to create a lot of thoughts in characters' minds or dialogue. And I didn't feel comfortable calling all of that nonfiction because, again, I didn't have the chance to interview Genick and Mila and Helena and my grandfather. You know, I didn't hear it from their mouths. I was hearing it from the second generation's mouths. And so I just decided I was going to call it historical fiction, which allowed me a little bit more creativity, the license to add those very colorful details that I personally prefer to read a book that feels like you get lost in the story as opposed to you're reading about history. Does that make sense?
Sure, makes sense. And
Yeah.
how did the book did well
Yeah,
as a
no,
kid?
it was so fun. I launched it on it came out on Valentine's Day here in the States. And just to be polite, I sent an email saying thank you so much to my family. I sent everybody, I kept a blog throughout the process to kind of keep everybody abreast of what was happening and what kind of discoveries I was making and records I was finding. And I sent a big thank you to everybody. And I was like, guess what? Penguin, my publisher, is sending me on a little book tour. And I have an event in New York City at a Barnes and Noble. And they all came. Like the whole room was filled with my family. They all came to support me. And that was so telling. Thank God. Otherwise, there would have been nobody there.
No.
No one had heard of me.
Which year was that? That was
2017, February in
17.
2017. They all came. I was pregnant then with my second little boy. It was a really beautiful time together, and I had a small book tour. And the book did well, like off the bat, but it was sort of a soft, quiet launch. And then I think it was a word of mouth thing. And then a year later, when the paperback came out, it just took off. All of a sudden,
Wow.
it was in the hands of a lot of readers, and I think it is now 24 editions. I think that in America, it's sold over 1 million copies. Like it's gone so far beyond I could have ever imagined where it would go.
And the how did it go into the series? And that was did you present it, or it was somebody read it and was interested?
So this kind of goes back to how it doesn't normally happen this way. Also a very personal story. So, and it goes back actually to my husband, Robert, who made a very dear friend in summer camp when he was 12 years old. And his name was Tommy. And Tommy was a little bit older. He was actually Robert's counselor, and they became really, really good friends and have stayed friends. I met my husband in college in 1999 when I was 19 years old. I met Tommy a year later at 20 years old. So now I've known him for almost 25 years. And Tommy's been in the arts. And he actually talks about how he would come to our home on Martha's Vineyard when we were there in the summers, and he would sit next to my father, who was also in the arts. And he was a filmmaker and an actor. And he would talk to my father about possibly trying a career in theater. And he took off, and all of a sudden he's incredibly successful. He's directed many, many things on Broadway, including Hamilton, the musical, and now also a couple of television series and adaptations. And so he called me just after my father had passed away, actually. He says, your dad's been on my mind, and your book has been on my mind, and I would love to try to partner with you to take it to the screen. And that was when the paperback came out. And it was actually just before the book hit a bestseller list in the States on the New York Times. He had no idea, but he was just like, it had landed in his heart, and he said, I'd like to do this. And that felt like a dream come true, because honestly, I was a little nervous for it to fall into the wrong hands in
Sure.
Hollywood, and to have somebody take the story and exploit it, or do something I wasn't comfortable with. But having Tommy at the helm, a dear friend who's incredibly talented, and he just, he's like, this is a family story. I want to tell it. I want to tell the story of your family. And he boils it down to, it's essentially a family who wants to come together again around the dinner table. It's set to the backdrop of the Holocaust, but it is a human family story. And he wanted to tell it that way, kind of like I wrote the book, in a way that didn't feel dusty or historical, and that felt like you were just there alongside this family living history in the moment. And so I immediately agreed, of course. And we took it out the summer. We took a long time to write a pitch and prepare, like, how we would take it. And I say we, it was myself and Tommy and our showrunner, Erica Lopez, who's amazing. So she's the person who's really in charge of almost everything. So writing scripts and first writing the pitch. And so we went out in the summer of
But did you
2019.
participate in the adaptation, or they did it themselves?
Yeah, well, first we pitched it around, and no one picked it up. They said, great idea. This is an amazing story, but it's not for us. And then we pitched it again. We took a break, and we pitched it again during the pandemic over Zoom. So that was all live in LA and very cool. Over Zoom, we pitched it and to Hulu, Disney Plus, and they picked it up. And I'm not sure if it was because they all this, we were all living in this world of fear and isolation, perhaps, but they picked it up right away. And again, because Tommy is such a good friend and trusted me and I trusted him, he said, how involved would you like to be in the process? And I said, every step of the way, please. So the next step was to Erica, our showrunner, hired a group of writers, and we put together what's called a writer's room. And we met together every day for 5 months to adapt the story. So to take the 420 pages of written copy and adapt it for 8 hours of screen. It was an incredibly challenging process. I was not writing the scripts. There were other people writing the scripts, but I was there to offer any source material, any background material, answer questions, which often Jose and Michelle would get, because it was a question I might not be able to answer. So I would send the family questions all the time. And that took our research to an even deeper level than I had in the book, because these writers, they wanted to know everything from way before the war. They wanted to get to know the essence of every single character, real life person whose story they were telling. So with the writer's room, we had our
And
scripts.
who had the idea? Who had the idea of inviting Jewish characters, actors to be the characters?
It felt just like it was probably Tommy and Erica discussed it and floated it by me. It just felt like a very natural decision to hire an entirely Jewish cast. And I'm really proud of the fact that we did. And we have a very global cast as well, about a third Israeli, a third British, and a third American. And somehow, our casting director, Fiona in London, just, we all played a part in it, but it started with her. And somehow it's a very big task to put together a family. There were 12 leads, and they all had to feel like family or a spouse, and so I biased, but I think the casting is phenomenal. I think everybody did an incredible job. And we had, set designers, costume designers coming in a few months before we started. And then we shot it in Bucharest, Romania, the bulk of it. We started Thanksgiving of 2023. 2022, and then shot for 9 months. And our last month and a half were shot in Spain. So we got to do some of the coast, a lot of Rio, the Isla das Flores, and Dakar, Morocco, places like that. We shot in Spain, and we wrapped it up. And
Why in Spain? Why particularly in Spain? Because of the
I don't, that's a great question. I think there was a really good production company there. And we also, the scouts went everywhere, but I think they found the really beautiful parts of the coastline and the desert, and the downtown could pass in Malaga and in Cadiz, where we were. We felt like could be a good replacement for places like Rio, and the beaches. The beaches are so yeah, everybody kind of came together and said, okay, we can make this work, and they have a really good production company there, so it was a nice place to end. It was a beautiful last few weeks of shooting.
Wow, it's such a continuation. We are the lucky ones. Everything fell on its place, and such a
Yeah.
beautiful story for the production, from the book to the screens. Really amazing. Somebody probably up there was also helping in that process.
Yeah, it was absolutely, the stars were aligned, and I would just love to think that somewhere the relatives are looking down and smiling, but it was very, very, so many things had to kind of come together at the right place and the right time, and especially the people involved to make it work.
Right.
And
And you had to have the energy of undertaking this, which is like, it's a big thing, every step, it's a lot of it's a big challenge.
yeah, both projects were really big projects, but again, never felt like work. It just was always a joy.
We're
And sort
all looking forward to see it on the screen here in Brazil. Do you know when it's going to be
I'm going
shown?
to get back to you so you can put that in the notes. I will get you a date.
Okay.
I've heard
Okay.
August, but I'll try to get a specific date.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And so I would like to join. I would like to use this moment now to put everybody together and have a little talk about the content, because I just wanted to give like a frame to everybody of how this amazing story got told. And now, not only the success of a book that sold like 1 million copies, but now screens are always, a possibility for so many more people to watch it. So it's really incredible. And I sort of followed from afar, because I've been in touch with Michel, more was there sometimes, but mostly with Michel. And he was all the time reporting, saying, "Oh, the book is going to come out. It's going to be great." And he told me about the family reunion and all that. And then when you had the launching of the series in Washington. So they're all always very excited, and they feel very much part of it, not only of the story itself, but of this possibility of telling the story. So I would like to invite you, Zé and Michel, now to go back. Let's see how we work this. First of all, Zé, tell us a little about. I know you're a character at the series. They have the moment where you in Siberia. Your like family has been running all over. Thousands of miles. You got to an imprisonment camp in Siberia, and there you were born. And tell us a little bit. I was asking you if you have any memories. Not you wouldn't have any memories of being a baby, but you probably have memories of the journey from there back to to Italy, and then to Tel Aviv. The way that you had to escape. Do you have memories? Yeah.
Well, the story is long, very long, but resuming, my father took us, me and my mother, to Palestine, and we passed through Egypt. We passed through a lot of countries, a lot of different situations, and I stayed 2.5 years, almost 3 years, 2.5 years in Palestine, Tel Aviv, Palestine. And after we went to Italy to through the cruise, the Red Cross. Everybody found each other, and we came after a couple of months to Brazil, and that's our story started. And so we have a lot of stories that on the movie they tell, and I think it's much better. See the movie,
But it was,
and understand all the history, and understand what the family did to be together, survive, and have good luck and good optimism to be together. And now, after 50, 60, 70 years, we are together. We are happy, and we are an example to the future for other countries, for other families to live together, stay together with good good purposes, because the life is exactly that.
and it was Eddie, your Georgia, your grandfather, that was the connection with Brazil, right? He was the
Yes.
one that brought everybody to Brazil.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the story is that my grandmother turned in some of her wartime bonds to help pay for the passage of the family that she'd never met. But yes, he encouraged everybody to come to Brazil. I think everybody was ready to get out of Europe and start over, I imagine.
And then he ended up marrying your grandmother, right? And moving to the United States.
Yes, yeah.
Wonderful. And I think it's so powerful that you have that story of 1938 when the family was together on a Passover dinner. And then it's almost like have this picture of you getting together on 2000 on that opportunity of your graduation and reuniting, some 60 years later, and being together again. It's such such a miracle after everything that the world went through. Michelle,
I'm here.
Yeah, tell us about that feeling of being. You were not there. You were born already in Rio, and
Yes.
but tell me about this feeling of you were there in 2000. And you all the time you were telling me about the book from the very beginning when the book was not yet a success. Michelle was all the time saying, "Oh, my cousin, she's writing a book about the family history." He was so excited, and everything just went up and up and up, becoming upgrade after upgrade. On the book is a success. Now it's going to become a series. Do you remember that family reunion in 2000?
Sure, I remember that. Sure, I do, and I'll make 2 points. One on the family itself. Georgia said, well, Georgia was what, 19 years old, and or less than that. But when her interpretation of the family togetherness was one where it appears to be separated, but my perception was quite to the contrary, in the sense that even when you were not born, Georgia, your grandfather, would come to Rio, to Sao Paulo, to visit the family for Pesach and other events. It's amazing. The family has always been together. 3 of them were in Brazil. Adi and Jakub were in the United States. So that connection, even though they were away, there was very close. Eddie, I remember Eddie in Sao Paulo and Rio very often on those special, and even Jakub once came with sons, so forth. So the family, when you go through the book, when the Pesach parties, etc., this was reality. I mean, the family was very close together, and that's one feeling I have. That's that continuity of that family feeling, which is still today, as José says, and as Georgia point so strongly. So this is number one. Number two, yes, we were the lucky ones. And what were some of the lucky moments? There were many lucky moments. And, I was thinking, and I was obviously more interested, not also in their survival, in the way they were taken away from their homes, etc. But I was more interested in how they arrived in Brazil, because I was in my mother's belly when we arrived. I was done in Italy,
Made in
we
Italy.
arrived.
I suspected that. Your happiness, the way you talk with your hands.
They arrived in August 1946, and I was born in March 1947. So I was already in my mother's belly. And José as well was done. José was born on March 17, 3 days before me, but a few years before. But summer in Europe was, I think, an important time for them to do us. To do whatever it's necessary, etc. So, but my point here is that the lucky things, I pointed out, I think two very important lucky things. One, when Adi meets Sousa Dantas and the way he meets Sousa Dantas in Vichy. What is Vichy? Vichy is where the French government was settled when Germans come into Germany. So there was Eddie in Vichy, and he meets Sousa Dantas in a hotel area close to the embassy and so forth, and he gets a passport to Brazil. And
Do you know how he got in touch? Who told him that the Brazilian that Dantas was helping? Do you know how he got that information?
I don't know exactly how he got that information. I think he would go to many different embassies. He went to Venezuela, to Argentina, etc. He was looking for spaces to go, and Brazil was probably one of those situations. And he ended up with Sousa Dantas in a conversation, and Sousa Dantas tells him, "Hey, go, leave your passport with my secretary and come back 2 days from now." And that's what happened. He came 2 days from now and he got the passport to Brazil. So when we say lucky ones, I'm trying to just, make that connection. And I just don't think that it's luckiness, but it's also, as I say, ability to deal with negative moments and negative environments. And I think the story of the family was very much like that. Luckiness together with ability to deal with very unusual situations, survival situations, change your name, change your date, change whatever. I mean, say 3 things that are in the middle of other things. So very interesting. So the first luckiness was, in my view, was this encounter with Sousa Dantas in Vichy, where the Brazilian embassy actually moved when the Germans came to France. So the Brazilian embassy went to Vichy as well. And the other interesting lucky thing that I find is when Adi and Caroline in Rio, they start there was no internet, there was no telegrams were whatever they were in the time, but they were writing to embassies all over the world to see if connection could be made with the family that was in Europe. I mean, they couldn't talk, but they were, Eddie and Caroline. Caroline was, I think, working or in the American embassy in Rio.
Yes.
And that was she was, and I think she was very helpful in transmitting to the world the search for the Kirk family. So this, imagine finding, your brothers and sisters in the world from Rio when there's no, through letters, mail. And I think this was a very lucky also event in addition to all the other events.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, because there are so many, every part of the family, because this is the lucky moments for Eddie to be able to come to Brazil and then to connect with family. But everybody had to do their own little lucky things
Yes.
all over. I think this is the beauty of this story, because it's usually you have a lot of people were lucky in that sense, but it was not a happy ending because most of the families would end up dying. It was a horrible period. So it's like something really out of the regular the story that you have from the family. Yeah, and I'm sure the family, and it comes out from the way that you're all very very warm and very there is something that has to do probably with the characteristics of your family that is enmeshed with this whole real story of events and all this.
We were very close, Newton. So just to, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure. No.
Eddie, my father died. I was 7 years old. One day I received, I was 15 or 17, I received a call from Pan American, and I said, there is a ticket here for you to come to the United States. I said, what? What did I, what was this, that lottery? What did I, no, your uncle Eddie said that's his telephone number. He sends it. And José spent time with Eddie and the family in Plainville, Massachusetts, very important time. So we were together.
I love hearing you say that, like the characteristics of love, because so many readers would tell me when I read the book, it feels like a love story. Like, and it's not something I tried to write. I think the way that that Zay and Michelle and all of the cousins talked about their parents and about each other was infused with so much admiration and so much love that it just naturally found its way into the narrative and I think into the series as well. And I think humor is a way you use love and humor and music and to get through hard times, right? And I think we weren't there, but I imagine that the family leaned hard on when they didn't have each other, on moments of levity, and whether that was my grandfather writing music or Herta taking a moment in the Siberian woods to admire the scenery or to hold her baby and feel a moment of joy in that. So I tried to weave throughout the book the balance of dark and light, and I think in the show we do that too, and it comes across almost even stronger in the series because you can see like a look from across the table, or a little inside joke, or the way that the siblings interact is so beautiful. It's so human and so real, and I hope we captured some of the love, because that's one of my favorite words and favorite themes of our story.
How was the feedback of the series in the US?
Really beautiful, really good. I think it's resonating the way we hoped it would. And it's really interesting. I'm getting emails from all over the world now that it's launching internationally as well. But people are coming into it and sort of accessing it in different ways. So some might say, oh, this is the story of my grandfather in Siberia that I never knew, and you brought it to life for me. Or some might say, I have family from Radom and Poland, and now I can imagine life before there. Or they say, you captured the Passover dinner so perfectly. Or they might say, I'm a new mother, and I can't even fathom what it was like for Mila to try to take care of Felicia in that time. And so because this family was so big and all surviving in their own ways, and while continuing to live, because they were doing so, like Michelle said, like in hiding with false IDs, living under the noses of the Germans and the Russians, you kind of feel like you're watching this family just living. And so it's very relatable in that way. And I think people are coming into it. There's so many different access points for this story because it's so broad. But yeah, it's gotten a lot of amazing reviews, and people who are watching it are just loving it. So I thank God. But honestly, the most important people to like it are the family. So
Wow.
we all came together at the Holocaust Museum for a screening. I think there are 32 of us in total, and I just held my breath, and after we showed the pilot, I looked at everybody and I could see the tears in their eyes, and they all hugged me up. And so for me, the fact that the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. is opening their doors, and not only that, they allowed us to donate some of our family artifacts. That plus the family appreciating it and feeling like we did a good job. That means everything.
You did. I'm sure, because the feeling is that that story has a closure at the possibility of having the book and having the series, because most stories got lost. Most stories were not as lucky, and most stories got lost. So I think the closure of having that possibility of having you becoming the the instrument for that story to come to life for everybody, it's amazing. That itself is a continuation of the lucky story of the family.
Yeah, certainly. I felt that in DC with so many family members in the audience. We were there, and 3 generations of us were there, and like that's everything, right? That's the family still living. And when you see the series at the very end, we include a postscript with pictures of the actual family members, and some statistics, and we say that there are now almost 100 descendants from those 5. And so, and we have pictures of everybody in real life, and I think it does bring a lot of closure in the most like satisfying way, because you're right, there just aren't stories with endings like that. Like it's so unusual, right?
Yeah, it's amazing to be able to tell a Holocaust story with a happy ending.
I know.
We had films in the past, they do, trying to bring it from the humor side and all that, but somehow it comes out a little fake, a little too much, because it was a horrible period. But to have a story of love, connection, that was able to maintain, and everybody was lucky, because there was some luck element that everybody was able to get to be in the right place, the right moment, and do. I think this is the very special part of this whole endeavor. But we're coming close. It's unbelievable. This hour passed like very, very quick. I'm sure everybody that is watching us is, you didn't tell the story. We didn't go over the whole story. You have the book in Portuguese. We're gonna pass on the information about when the series is gonna be available in Brazil. And I just wanted to maybe to conclude a little with, I spoke yesterday with Zé, and Zé was very emotional, saying that this is a very special moment in the world, where we have the resurgence of anti-Semitism, and we have a very difficult period for Jews. Jews are very, very scared, because our past is so heavy, so difficult. It's totally, you see, your grandfather wanted to assimilate, because assimilation, usually people in the Jewish community think assimilation as something bad, that we should avoid everything. But we have to understand how difficult it was for everybody going through that experience, and the idea of having new generations. They really wanted to protect the new generations, and we now realize that this is all so alive and real. And Zé was saying that he feels that the movie, the series and the book have also this new extra meaning, not only to keep the memory of the Holocaust alive, but to have that human dimension, because it's a real family, like everybody's family, the Jews, the Palestinians, the Iranians, everybody's families. And he was very much saying this. Could you address a little of this, how this moment is touching you, and having this so powerful instrument, to the public, how this touches you in this moment?
Yeah, absolutely. It is wild when I think back that it was 2008 when I said I'm going to try to research and unearth and record this story. And like, if you had told me then that it would feel so very relevant today, I would have never believed you, you know, like it's the parallels that we see are heartbreaking and really scary where we are in this moment in time. And I think we're all kind of trying to figure out, like, what do we do about this, and how do we feel about this, and are how do we take action, and what do we say? And I think, you know, the thing that brings me hope is that I've heard that there are many young people watching the show and reading the book. And I think that's the audience right now. I mean, I think Jews around the world are finding a lot of hope in the story. Just for the story itself, it's like we said, it's a story of with a happy ending, of courage and perseverance and love. But when younger audiences can connect to this moment in time in a way that, as you described, feels very human, again, you build up a sense of empathy. And when you care about somebody or someone, I think that can only spread love and help in this situation that we're in now. And I hope that that's one thing that this show might offer, is some empathy and some opening of conversations and some asking of questions. And you're right, like, no one's suffering is better or worse than in other groups, you know. It's like human suffering is everywhere, and what can we do now to acknowledge it and to not be passive about it, and to tell the stories again, like you said, to keep them alive, not just for history's sake, but to evoke maybe a shift in mindset, and it certainly evokes some empathy and understanding. And I hope that the show brings a little bit of that, and that I wouldn't wish the timing, you know, I hate that it feels relevant right now, but in a way it's like, okay, well, there's no more important time than now to tell stories like this, and perhaps try to
Yeah.
reach some people in their hearts, you know.
Yeah, I wanted to have just like to end with Zay. I think Zay is having to go somewhere in his car, and so I don't know if he's ready to talk to us. But it's very amazing. Like, he was born in the midst of this. He is like the last surviving character of this incredible story, and so I'll make his words. I'll pass on his words, yeah, that he said yesterday, that he really, this is what he felt, that the connection of the family, the love of the family, that everything that Michelle was also presenting, that they were always in connection, trying to be together, that this is very inspirational for the kind of energy or supply for us to go through all the challenges of our times today. And he was very helpful that the story, they're also proud of you. You know, they were all the time telling me, and it is a pleasure to meet you, even it's not personally, but because they were all so excited, so enchanted with the fact that somebody from the new generation was able to pick all the pieces and to create this amazing possibility of telling this story.
Wow.
We all here, you know, in Brazil, are waiting, looking forward to see all the you know, the 8 chapters of the series. And I would very much like to thank my dear friend Michelle and Zé. If you're listening what we're saying, Zé, thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Georgia, for again, for this beautiful testimony and talk with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having us on, and Michelle and Zay. It's so lovely to be on with the two of you, and the love and the support that I have felt from start to finish on this project, from these two and from everybody involved in the family, has just been very overwhelming. So I feel like the lucky one to be able to share it, but it's because of the family that we're all here today. So thank you so much to the family, and thank you for the time today. It was really nice talking with you.